be healthier, knowledge is everything. Steps, calories, exercise minutes. Because proven quality sleep is vital to our health and wellness, only the Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed keeps you cool, then senses and effortlessly adjusts for your best sleep. It tells you exactly how well you slept, your sleep IQ score. Our smart sleepers get 28 minutes more restful sleep per night, so you can be your best for yourself and those you care about most. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. Visit sleepnumber.com to shop now.
Here's why I threw away all my blood pressure meds.
Drinking this before bed can lower blood pressure by 26 points. If you're over 50 and struggling with high blood pressure, then you need to hear this. People are getting their blood pressure under control by adding
I'm going to start with prayer. We're live right now. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together today to do as we are told, to listen and hear your words and to learn more about you and your word and your Son, Jesus. Thank you for sending your Son, Jesus, our Messiah, as our sacrifice, to be our sin sacrifice, to be our inner high priest for the veil you took down. Guide us to being closer to you and become your word, your representative to those that still do not know you. Turn us into your flashlight, your candle that leads us back to you and those others. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. I gotta clean that up a little bit more. Okay, so this week I went back to the blessing and a curse that Noah gave his sons. I have the verse here, and ironically, in the Jewish translation, this is a Tanakh. This is somebody who is not a believer in Jesus. This is from a non-Messianic translation group of Orthodox Jews, and I looked up the word, and it translates many ways, as might, may, shall, will, but I find it very interesting how they worded Genesis 9:27. Many translated to may or might or, giving. As to the Gentile nation dwelling in the tents of Shem. Notice here where it was said over them, and this was right after Ham defiled their father, and Shem and Japheth grabbed the cloak, walking in backwards to not see their father and further defile and violate him. And here it is. Blessed is Hashem, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be a slave to him. May God extend Japheth, but he will dwell in the tents of Shem. May Canaan be a slave to them. I found that quite interesting. I would have more expected to see this in our regular English translations, not in one of the Orthodox Jewish ones. That I came out with a big smile on my face, and it was like, there it is. And that's the Art Scroll Tanakh. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because that's exactly what we are doing. God chose the Israelites, and the tabernacle, the tent, is for him and them. Now we not only get to be part of it, but we are in it. It is in us. So, and then an excerpt from the Messianic Bible webpage. The Hebrew scriptures were not written or compiled in a vacuum. It was composed over several centuries. No one knows exactly how long a time frame. However, did you ever wonder what the Hebrews were thinking when Moses said that Yahweh would send you another prophet like me from among your own brothers? Deuteronomy 18:15. Was this messianic in their eyes? Or might they be thinking, oh, he's speaking of Joshua at that point? What did King David or the prophet Isaiah think when they read these words of Deuteronomy 18:15, hundreds of years later? And what about Daniel or Ezekiel in exile, or even the 12 disciples as they walked with Yeshua, Jesus? How did they view Moses' words? Yahweh will send you another prophet like me from your own brothers. We will look at each prophecy and how it was viewed by the sages and the people of the day when it was written, as well as by Jewish scholars, rabbis throughout history to the present. And that's basically what the Bible's taking us through. So far, we've been through Genesis and Exodus and now Leviticus. This is an oral to written family history that this is our history. Another thing God is explaining here as to what to look for. Now, there is some question if this was all just what we're dealing with now is just, i.e. traditional leprosy as we know it, which is actually Hansen's disease. But the translation came about where they use leprosy because of the Septuagint. And Sarat was translated as lepra. And the term Zara is traditionally rendered leprosy because of its translation by Greek lepra. Also New Testament and Josephus. The Greek covers a wide range of diseases that produce scales. Greek lepra may have included true leprosy, i.e. Hansen's disease, but is definitely not limited to. In fact, biblical descriptions of Zara do not include the necrosis associated with Hansen's disease. Thus far, no skeletons of the biblical period really show any signs of Hansen's disease. And I saw a couple of reports on this, so I'm not saying it's not there, but as at this point, there's nothing I could find, or a couple of other people said that. So basically, in Greek, it does mean rough or here is Sareth. Let me go here. Sareth was a general term for many progressive skin disease, a whitening or splotchy bleaching of the skin, raised manifestations of scales, scabs, infections, rashes, etc., as well as generalized molds and surface discoloration of any clothing, leather, or discoloration on walls or surfaces throughout the home. And here's...
It looks like psoriasis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, these all fall under that category. So, Strong's number 6883 to Saretha from it blends into 6879. I'm pulling this all out of the Strong's, and the Brown's Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon. Sareth is leprosy in people, malignant skin disease in clothing, a mildew or a mold, in buildings, a mildew or a mold. Parts of speech, it's a noun, it's on the feminine side, and from Hebrews 6879, which is the Strong's number, compared to the, which blends into the ancient Hebrew lexicon, number 2691, it comes up with, in fact, welt, an infection of skin, usually leprosy that causes welts, also an infection of mildew or mold as welt on clothing or building. So, I couldn't find any really super dupers on it, but so now the Lord is giving Moses and Aaron instructions of what to look for. Just like any other profession, you go and you learn what to do. Churches and synagogues was also where a lot of the medical and stuff was done. I mean, before the government took over it, you went to the church to get medical. You went to church to get taken care of. Food, welfare, other, clothing, everything. If you put the government in charge of the sands of the Sahara, there wouldn't be any sand left. So here is God adding more details for health, spiritually and physically. So the law concerning leprosy. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore, then he shall be brought to Aaron and the priest, or to one of his sons the priest. The priest shall examine the sore on the skin of the body, and if the hair on the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it's a leprous sore. The priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean. So we're talking, if you got something deep going on, back then, I'm assuming if you cut yourself pretty deep, they didn't really want you out working and stuff like that. More also to protect you. I mean, we don't want other people's blood on us, but if you're out there sweating and getting dirt, and it gets infected, then you're not able to work anymore. So let's get you taken care of. So, but if a bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore for 7 days. Oh, wait a minute. You don't quarantine everybody and just let the... Never mind. So, here, this... Okay, so here, who gets isolated? I don't know why this got here. Jesus, we see Jesus. He moves with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him and said, I am willing, be cleansed. As soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Yeah. And FYI, anybody who's listening to this, if you have the NIV version, I'm sorry, you will see that there's a word here that the NIV says, and then Jesus moved with, and he was indignant about doing this. That's in the NIV, yeah. I was shocked because I almost copied and pasted that in here. Mark 1, 41 through 44. And that's where you'll find it. So, and then he strictly warned him, Jesus telling him, and sent him away at once. And he said, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded as a testimony. What are we doing right here? We're learning what this is where Moses is learning from God how to handle all these things. So here's your full circle. So, because the priest shall examine, now we're going back, and this is, the priest shall examine the person on the 7th day. And indeed, if the sore appears to be as it was, the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days, making sure that it's, yeah. Then the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and indeed, if the sore has faded, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall announce him clean, it's only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab should at all spread over the skin, after he has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. And if the priest sees that the scab has indeed spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It's leprosy. So, again, what it could be, there's so many things, infection, MRSA, leprosy itself. These are all classified under this scaly, bubbly, whatevers. When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the swelling on his skin is white, and it has turned the hair white, and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of his body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. If the leprosy breaks out over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore from head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider, indeed, if leprosy has covered his body, and shall pronounce him clean who has the sore, it is turned white, he is clean. Now, I looked this up because I was struggling with it, and this is the closest thing I came to. And now I've got to pretend like I can pronounce this word. Vitiligo. I actually know a couple of people that have gotten this.
I was just going to say, I do too.
So,
One of the Hansboroughs has that. It's pigment.
yeah, it is an autoimmune. It's caused by an autoimmune something. So,
And you sounded pretty good on that.
I tried. And I mean, there's so many things like with scabs, impetigo, chickenpox, measles, ringworm. So, yeah. But when the raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. So this picture here is obviously no raw flesh. It's just loss of pigment. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce them unclean, to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean, it is leprosy. So, or if the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him, and indeed, if the sore has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. Who has the sore, he is clean. I wish I could have found a video to help visualize this, but I'm surprised you're not seeing me with my eyes going crossed right now, because it's what comes to my mind is like when a scab comes off. You know how your skin's real white? And like I said, there's not much in depth. I really did, because it was like, I thought it would be really neat. Nope. And I don't know where and even how to start doing that. And I ain't going there. So if the body develops a boil in the skin and it is healed, and in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling or a bright spot, reddish white, then it shall be shown to the priest. And if the priest sees indeed it appears deeper than the skin and its hair has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore which has broken out of the boil. The only thing I'm thinking of is that was a nasty goiter. Goiter. Yeah. I'm sorry. I tried.
What are we going to have for dinner?
But if the priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in it, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days. And if it should at all spread over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. But if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the priest shall examine it, and indeed, if the hair of the bright spot has turned white and appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out in the burn. Therefore, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. All as I'm thinking here is infection. I could be completely wrong. But that's what comes to my mind. But if a priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in the bright spot, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if it has spread over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. But if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread on the skin, but has faded, it is swelling from the burn, the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is a scar from the burn. Yeah, especially older, when we were kids and we would get a really bad cut or something like that, it seemed like those scars were a little bit different than today's, where they constantly get in there and pull them together and make them look as small as possible. I don't know. So, if a man or a woman has a sore on the head or the beard, the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed if it appears deeper than the skin, and there is in it a thin yellow hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a scaly leprosy of the head or beard. Psoriasis, alopecia, But if the priest examines the scaly sore, and indeed it does not appear deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale for 7 days. And on the 7th day the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed if the scale has not spread, then and there is no yellow hair in it, and the scale does not appear deeper than the skin, he shall shave himself, but the scale he shall not save. And the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale another 7 days. I'm probably gathering that they don't want to agitate it. Get everything else get cleaned, like if you've got lice or mange, or if you've got a low immune system, mange will affect. I mean, we see it all the time in dogs.
Ingrown hair will do that. Will do that too.
Yeah.
It's nasty. You can get some nasty ingrown hair.
Those need to be cut open and pulled out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh dear.
Okay. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the scale, and indeed if the scale has not spread over the skin and does not appear deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scale should at all spread over the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him, and indeed, if the scale has spread over the skin, the priest need not seek for the yellow hair. He's unclean. We'll just skip. You can. I'm reading this. Has anybody ever been through the old Mitchell on Demand books, where you would say, well, the car's running like this, so you go to this section, and they say, well, if it's sputtering, go to page this, line that. And if it's doing this, go to this other page, line here. That's what I feel like here. If it's this and this, go to here. If it's this and this, they go out there. So, if a man or a woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, specifically white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and indeed, if the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is a white spot that grows on the skin, he is clean. A wart? I don't know. As for the man whose hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean.
Okay, you're clean now.
Okay.
He whose hair has fallen from his forehead, he is bald on the forehead, but he is clean. Do you guys feel better now?
Yeah.
Okay. And if there is on the bald head or bald forehead a reddish white sore, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead, or he hit his head. Okay, I'm sorry. I tried to help.
Yes, you do.
Then the priest shall examine it, and indeed if the swelling of the sore is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, as an appearance of leprosy on the skin of the body, he is a leprous man, he is unclean. And then the priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His sore is on his head. Now, the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn and his head bare. And he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. Pronounce it clean, or to pronounce it unclean. And he shall be unclean. All the days he has the sore, he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. So also, if a garment has a leprous plague in it, whether it is a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it is in the warp or woof of a linen or wool, whether in leather or in anything made of leather, and if the plague is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather, whether in the warp or in the woof, or in anything made of leather, it is a leprous plague and shall be shown to the priest. And I forgot to look up their definition of warp or woof. My bad. The priest shall examine the plague and isolate that which has the plague 7 days. I don't see anything here about 2 years. And he shall, I said, I don't see anything there. It says 2 years, 7 days. And he shall examine the plague on the 7th day. If the plague has spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, in the leather or in anything made of leather, the plague is an active leprosy and it is unclean. So that's kind of indicating a growing mold or growing fungus, or he shall therefore burn that garment in which is the plague, whether warp or woof, in the wool or in the linen or anything of leather, for it is an active leprosy. The garment shall be burned in the fire. Sounds pretty serious. But if the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything made of leather, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing in which is the plague, and he shall isolate it another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine the plague after it has been washed. And indeed, if the plague has not changed its color, though the plague has not spread, it is unclean, and you shall burn it in the fire. It continues eating away, whether the damage is outside or inside. So I'm gathering there are some pretty bad molds, or I mean, you store something, it gets moist, or, and so, and some of this stuff is very, very unhealthy for people. I mean, very unhealthy. If the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has faded after washing it, then he shall tear it out of the garment, whether out of the warp or out of the woof or out of the leather. But if it appears again in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or anything made of leather, it is a spreading plague. You shall burn it with fire, that in which has the plague. And if you wash the garment, either warp or woof, or whatever is made of leather, if the plague has disappeared from it, it shall be washed a second time, and it shall be clean. Maybe it was just a big blotch of mud or something. You got to it before it got into it. This is the law of the leprous plague in a garment of wool or linen, either in the warp or the woof, or anything made of leather, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean. The ritual for cleansing healed lepers. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "This shall be the law of the leper for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the leprosy is healed in the leper, then the priest shall command to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 living and clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop." And I got into a conversation today on hyssop, which led to some interesting things, but I'm thinking this is one of the first times in the Bible that we see this word hyssop. It is it's a flower. It's a really pretty kind of lavender purple flower, kind of along the lines of something like that, and it's got these like broadleaf bracts, and generally they will grow on the most part 18 to 24 inches. Some will get 3 feet. There are some varieties that get real tall, but generally your desert ones are between 18 and 24 inches. Some areas that may get a little more moisture will get the
Because the flower lavenders, they are like
it looks a lot like lavender. It really, I was it was, yeah.
Wasn't hyssop one of the things that they used back in Egypt to put the blood on the lintel doorpost?
Yeah, yeah, I think there was, that was, that was the first time. I was sitting there going, kept thinking Rachel for some reason, and those were mandrakes. I'm like going, oop. No, we can't. Yeah, that's right. Hyssop and for spreading the blood over the mantle, and and now we're using it. It's always been part of a purification process. And the interesting part was that they dipped it in sour wine. They dipped the hyssop in the sour wine and tried to give it to Jesus. He couldn't be, even though it was with sour wine, he couldn't be purified. He couldn't take our sin. If he got purified before he died, he couldn't take our sins to death. I thought that was really, I was like, whoa, I didn't get, that's interesting. So hyssop, obviously here, and the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. Okay, so now you've got hyssop and these other things, clean birds, and one of the birds is going to be killed in an earthen vessel representing us over running water. Sounds kind of like a baptism in a way. Just a little way. As for the living bird, he shall take it in the cedar wood and the scarlet and the hyssop, and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and let the living bird loose in the open field. We're going to see something here pretty quick that resembles it. Actually, it'll be next week. Because next week we'll be dealing a lot with Yom Kippur. That the atonement, that's what it bases from, Yom Kippur, which is actually next month. So then notice that we keep having this running water. Remember I said last week about doctors used to go from going through the death of somebody and doing the autopsy, and then go over here and deliver a baby and not wash their hands. See, washing hands, it's biblical. So he who is cleansed is to be he who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, wash himself in water, that he may be clean. After that, he shall come into the camp and shall stay out of his tent for 7 days.
So he comes into the camp, but sits outside his tent for 7 days.
I couldn't figure that one.
With no clothes on, his shaven hair. Wash himself.
But on the 7th day he shall shave all his hair off, and his beard, and his eyebrows. All his hair he shall shave off. He shall wash his clothes and wash his body in the water, and he shall be clean. I mean, you talk about a process. That is a serious process. On the 8th day, he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, 1 ewe lamb of the first year without blemish, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. A log of oil is a liquid measure that can be anywhere from 12 to 21 ounces. That was all I could find. Then the priest who makes him clean shall present the man who is to be made clean and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. The priest saying, "It seems to me that there is some plague in the house." Okay, I'm going to back up here. Okay. So, and the priest shall take 1 male lamb and offer it as a trespass offering and the log of oil and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the burnt offering in a holy place. For as the sin offering is the priest's, so is the trespass offering. It is the most holy. That's where you're really pouring out your heart to God. That's as close as this person can get to this person at this time. The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot.
That was the same thing the priest went through.
Yeah. Purification. I think the priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. Then the priest shall dip his right finger into the oil that is in his left hand, and shall sprinkle of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. 7 times, yeah. Dip. Well, actually, it's this way. And of the rest of the oil in his hand, the priest shall put some on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the blood of the trespass offering. So where you put the blood, he put the oil also. I'm surprised he didn't just... The rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand, he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed. Is that a V8 moment? So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. He will. Then the priest shall offer the sin offering and make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from his uncleanliness. After he shall kill the burnt offering, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar. So the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. But if he is poor and cannot afford it, then he shall take 1 male lamb as a trespass offering to be waved, to make atonement for him, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, such as he is able to afford. One shall be a sin offering and the other a burnt offering. And he shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day for his cleansing, to the door of the tabernacle of the meeting before the Lord. This was one I just went over today. We all know that 7 is the number of complete. What is the 8th day of the week? Monday, new beginning. It's the first, but it's a new beginning. It's 8th also. So 8, when you see the number 8, that's a new start. It's the new beginning. So on the 8th day, he's doing all this so he can start completely anew, afresh. Start all over. Yep.
Okay.
So, and the priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering and put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and then the priest shall sprinkle it with his right finger, some of the oil on his left hand, 7 times before the Lord. Last time it was before. It's atonement for the Lord, and then this time it's the wave offering. So it's part 1, part 2, and 7 times. Yeah. Yeah. And the priest shall pour some of the priest shall put some of the oil that is in his hand on the tip of the right ear of the person who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot, and place the blood on the place of the blood of the trespass offering. So he's gotten the blood, he gets oil for atonement. He's gotten the blood for the next part of the offering, some more oil. Now he's got the trespass offering blood going into these, and some more oil. I mean, it was an elaborate process, more to, if you're doing this out of because you enjoy Lord and you're excited and you want to do it, this is like a party. This is like, look, Lord, look what I'm doing. But if you're looking at it like a commandment and like, then it becomes work. Then it becomes something you don't want to do, and that's not
used to it, so it's not.
Wonderful.
You know?
So then the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put on the head of him who is to be clean, to make an atonement for him before the Lord. So you got the trust, so you got the blood for each, the wave, the peace, the sin, the atonement, and clean, but it won't do what Jesus can do. And he shall offer one of the turtle doves or young pigeons, such as he can afford, such as he is able to afford. The one is a sin offering, and the other is a burnt offering, with the grain offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him who is to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the law for the one who had a leprous sore, who cannot afford the usual cleansing. So now the law concerning leprous houses. This I found very interesting, because listen to the words here. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when you have come into the land of Canaan, which I give you as a possession, and I put the leprous plague in a house in the land of your possession, and he who owns the house comes and tells the priest, saying, it seems to me that there is some plague in the house. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes in to examine the plague, that all that is in the house may not be made unclean, and afterward the priest shall go in to and examine the house. Notice the interesting one here. He's saying to Moses and Aaron, when you have come into the land, when you have come. That's a kind of a past tense thing. That's kind of like, at this point, God still, at this point, I think actually Moses and Aaron were supposed to go there. But we'll see where they flub up here soon enough. So then and then he shall examine the plague, and indeed if the plague is on the walls of the house with ingrained streaks, greenish or reddish, which appear to be deep in the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again on the 7th day and look. And indeed, if the plague has spread on the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which is the plague. They shall cast them out into an unclean place outside the city. So, back then it was much easier just to pull out a few rocks and put them where they needed to be. But I noticed if something's going on, they pull everything out, shut the door for 7 days, shut the house up for 7 days. That's to see what's going to happen. Let's evaluate, is this growing or is this just, yeah. So if it did, then you start taking out. So then, and he shall cause the house to be scraped inside all around, and the dust that they scrape off that they shall pour out in an unclean place outside the city. Then they shall take other stones and put them in the place of those stones, and he shall take other mortar and plaster the house. Now, we know that this is future tense because right now they're in tents. They don't have permanent facilities yet. Now, if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house after he has taken away the stones, after he scraped the house, and after it's plastered, then the priest shall come and look, and indeed if the plague has spread in the house, it is an act of leprosy in the house, it's unclean. And he shall break down the house, and its stone, its timber, and all the plaster of the house, and he shall carry them outside the city to an unclean place. Moreover, he who goes into the house at all while it is shut up, clean, or shall be unclean until evening. And he who lies down in the house shall wash his clothes, and he who eats in the house shall wash his clothes. So if you go in there, you wash your clothes and don't talk to me until the evening. But if the priest comes in and examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the plague is healed. And he shall take to cleanse the house 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. Then he shall kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over the running water. He shall take the cedar wood and the hyssop and the scarlet and the living bird and dip them in blood of the slain bird and in running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird and the running water and the living bird, with the cedar wood and the hyssop and the scarlet. Then he shall let the living bird loose outside the city in an open field, and make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law for any leprous sore and scale, for the leprosy of a garment and of a house, for a swelling and a scab, a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy. So I can, it is 16. Bodily discharges. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Speak to the children of Israel. Oops. All right, let me go back here. All right, where'd it go? I touched the wrong thing. There we go. Yeah, sorry about that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they can be. Especially when they're sleeping. Okay. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When any man has a discharge from his body, his discharge is unclean. And this shall be his uncleanliness in regard to his discharge, whether his body runs with his discharge or his body is stopped up by his discharge, it is his uncleanliness. Have you ever had those times where your nose wouldn't stop running? Or those times where you couldn't breathe because your nose was so clogged up? That's what comes to mind. And I'm sure there's plenty of other things, but every bed is unclean on which he who has laid the discharge lies, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. And whoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. He who sits on anything on which he who has the discharge shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean. Anyone who touches the body of him who has the discharge shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. If he who has the discharge spits on him who is clean, then he shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean till evening. Gee, thanks. Any saddle on which he who has discharge rides shall be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him shall be unclean until evening. He who carries any of those things shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean till evening. And whomever the one who has the discharge touches and has not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean till evening. So if he would have washed his hands right away, you tell me. The vessel of the earth that he who has the discharge touches shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water. And when he who has a discharge is cleansed of his discharge, then he shall count for himself 7 days for his cleansing, wash his clothes, and bathe his body in running water, and then he shall be clean. On the 8th day he shall take for himself 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord to the door of the tabernacle of meetings, and give them to the priest. And the priest shall offer them, one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord because of his discharge. If any man has an emission of semen, and then he shall wash all his body in water and be unclean until evening. And any garment and any leather on which there is semen, it shall be washed with water and be unclean till evening. I wonder something about a blue dress. And when a woman lies with a man, and there should be an emission of semen, they shall bathe in water and be unclean till evening. If a woman has a discharge, and the discharge from her body is blood, she shall be set apart 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean till evening. Everything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean. Also everything that she sits on shall be unclean. Whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean. And whoever touches anything that she sat on shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. If anything that is on her bed, or anything that is on which she sits, or when he touches it, he shall be unclean till the evening. If any man lies with her at all, so that her impurity is on him, he shall be unclean for 7 days, and every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, other than at the time of her customary impurity, or if it runs beyond her usual time of impurity, all the days of her unclean discharge shall be as the days of her customary impurity. She shall be unclean. Every bed on which she lies, all the days of her discharge, shall be to her as the bed of her impurity, and whatever she sits on shall be unclean as the uncleanliness of her impurity. Whoever touches those things shall be unclean. He shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean till evening. But if she is cleansed of her discharge, then she shall count for herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take for herself 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons, and bring them to the priest to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the priest shall offer one as a sin offering, one as a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her before the Lord for the discharge of her uncleanliness. Thus you shall separate the children of Israel from their uncleanliness, lest they die in their uncleanliness when they defile my tabernacle that's among them. This is the law for the one who has discharge, and for one who admits semen and is unclean, and thereby, and for her who is indisposed because of her customary impurity, and for those who has a discharge, either man or woman, and for them who lies with her who is unclean.
I'm just thinking about that woman in Jesus' day that had that for 12 years, I think it was. And how she was breaking every rule of society to be out in the midst of people.
Well, not only that, but think the leper. Think of all these things that Jesus is doing. Unclean, unclean, unclean. Here's these, and they're like, you're sitting with sinners. You're touching a leper. You're unclean. You're not even washing your hands.
Yeah, and after that woman was healed, it doesn't say anything about him going through the rituals of the
nothing.
The washing of the garments or anything else. In fact, he went on, and I think it was the little girl that was dead that he raised up.
So you
Took
think,
her by the hand.
so when we hear all this stuff about how God was trying to separate, and all these things that are unclean, 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 and then we think about what Jesus did. He was touching the lepers. He was healing them. He was, I mean, you had all this stuff going on. So I could see the Pharisees just going, but you didn't ritual yourself for 7 days and 8 days, and you know.
That was it when the leper came to Jesus, and everybody's going, no, don't touch him, but Jesus did anyway and healed him.
So and this was my little note here. This is where women was given the ability to atone, if you go way back, through having children because of the rituals. And cleaning one, they would have been unclean from discharges such as taking care of kids. There's this thing about, women shouldn't be in this position. Well, everything we did taking care of kids made you pretty much 24/7 unclean.
That's right, because they're nursing the babies.
You
have discharge from your breasts because, the milk. And
So, but they, but you get this, well, women shouldn't. No, women needed to learn, but they mostly weren't learned Torah. Anything after that, if they learned from their families. So, even part of their rituals, to find a woman of valor. See, today we're not labeled by these things. And these were priestly duties, and we're not priests, we're messengers. We see that in the book. I'm going to make you just a little bit less than a messenger. So, in the grand scheme of things, where you learn, how you learn, as long as it's God's teaching, I'm going to just go as far and say this. God's going to use who he's going to use, and man's opinion doesn't apply. My opinion, your opinion, God's going to use who God's going to use. He can use, never mind. He can use a lot of things. I got to hear a really good story today of a young gal who just went through some pretty emotional roller coaster, and thankfully it was less than a year, because most women don't get out of an abusive relationship. Physical, verbal, mental, gaslighted, was literally, I knew when I first saw the person that this other person was starting with, I knew it was just a conquest to start off with. But problem is, you can't tell them. Problem is, you got to be there to pick up pieces, and Jesus is our piece picker.
Because you have to learn for yourself.
So, I'm going to add, I'm going to put a link. If I know some people on Zoom, if you want to Zoom, I know sometimes it seems a little easier than trying to text or whatever. So I did go ahead and put together a Zoom thing, so that way if we want to have a discussion, pull some people together, I'm pretty flexible. So anyway, you're just in time. I'm praying out.
I just told her she's just in time for prayer.
So, thank you again, Father, for all the details you do and say to help guide even those of us who fail you the most. You made a way for us to follow you. You gave us a choice. Not that we make the best choices, but you allow us to learn why your way is the best. Thank you again, Father, for sending Jesus down to be our way back to you, to help us be the person you need us to be, to reach those who haven't been reached, to let us be that vessel for them to know you. And thank you for your unmerited favor you give to us daily. And Father, please forgive us when we fail to follow you. Protect and guide us in Yeshua, our Messiah, glorious name. In the blood of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.